All right, here we are again. Week 4, pod 4. What do you got?
Recently, because I coach some kids that play in team sports as well as track, I've been getting a lot of conversations about the lessons learnt from winning and losing, and how much focus you put on either the journey or the destination. And I think they're mutually exclusive topics, but they also interrelate to some extent. But one of the main things was that when you play in a team sport, when you enter a competition, say for like soccer, you might have 16 rounds in a competition. So you've got lots of opportunities, not only during the game, but during the season to win and to do well. Even though you might lose games during the season, you can still get to finals and win the overall competition. Whereas on the other hand, when it's track and you walk out onto the track for 200 meters, you get one go. And when it's over, there's winners with one winner and a lot of people that didn't. So it was the psychology about where do people sit in their journey in a team sport versus where do people sit in their journey in track, and how do you manage the psychology of it and the expectations of a track athlete and a team sport athlete, so to speak. Because there's their approach to their individual sports are different, and it has a very different psychological effect on you before you walk onto a field or a track, and how you feel after it, and what lessons do you take from that, and how do you reapply those lessons to either, which I've seen some people do, go and make a decision. This is not for me. I cannot get my head around this. I don't want to do this anymore, to I'm embracing this process and I really love it and I want to see where I can go with it.
Yeah, ultimately you have to enjoy the process. Ultimately, if you don't enjoy the process, whether you win or lose, it's probably a pretty horrible space to be in. And we've spoken about this, and both of us are probably in an interesting position to talk about this because we've both played team sports when we were younger, and then both moved into individual sports when we were older.
You know, what's interesting is that when I was playing rugby, and I played at a good standard during my career, I hated training, but I loved playing. I loved playing the game, but I hated training for the game. I just didn't. I was like running plays and being out. I just like, oh man, I just want to play. But track, I really enjoy the process of track at training. I really enjoy the training, and I'm not that enamored with competing. I do it and I go do it, but the anxiety it creates and all the preparation and everything that goes into it, it just like it wears me down. And I'm just like, you know what? I'd just rather be back running 4s at training. So weird.
Yeah.
That's the cycle.
I'm hearing you. I definitely 100% got to that space in track. I'd much prefer to train than compete. And I remember Phil having this conversation with Phil that the anxiety of actually racing wore him down. And he said, I don't like that anxiety, that feeling anymore of turning up and, you know, you carry the anxiety through the week. And I don't know anyone that, you know, we've spoken about this before as well, that Pete dealt with it extremely well. One of the best I've ever seen.
Yeah, he did.
And obviously, you know, I didn't race that well, I don't believe. But I got to the point playing football as well, where I much prefer to train and not play. And it wasn't the anxiety of playing. I just got sick of playing. I just got sick of the, you know, every weekend, that was my weekend. You know, you go and play. I couldn't do anything on a Friday night. I have to stay home to prepare for the game on Saturday. Your Saturday is basically out the window because, you know, it's a 2:00 or 2:30 in the afternoon game. I go and play. You get that beat up playing that I couldn't go out on a Saturday night. And then Sunday, I'm just a mess, just, you know, laying on the floor, buddy, sucking my thumb, trying to recover. And it's like, well, there goes another weekend. And, you know, by the time I got to 28 or 29, I'm like, I'm done with feeling like this every Sunday, not being able to walk.
Yeah. I got there as well. But, and just to drill down even further, the other thing which I really took me by surprise was when you compete, say, in athletics as an older athlete, like Masters, say, and you turn up to an event in Australia where it's likely to be a straight final, you can deal with that. That's just like turn up, run. You'd one run. And everyone goes, yeah, I can do that. So you turn up, warm up, and run, is done. When you go to a larger competition, which I've had a couple of experiences with now, where you from day one, the call room person walks out, because they always tell people what the requirements are to progress. And then they say, just win every round. Otherwise, you're finished. Just win everything.
What's the most stressful part of, and we'll get back to the original topic, we're always going to get off topic. What's the most stressful part for you at major competition?
It was that.
The call room.
It was call room.
It's the worst.
Yeah.
It's sitting in that flipping call room. It's the worst.
It's like, this is what I compare it to. It's like being on death row.
It is.
What you're hoping for, and you hear athletes say it. They're walking around, this stress on their face, they're freaking out. And here's the weird thing. The Olympics is about jump, run faster, higher, further, all of that. And they say Masters is about fun, friendship, and fitness. There's nothing fun going on in here at all. In fact, it's so stressful. People have said, it's like, I wish they'd just come up and put a bullet in my head. Because I
agree but that's a difference at that level, and I'm sure you would agree here, is that when we just competed at local level, you turn up, we go to the other side of the track, we warm up, you run back and forth, you have a chat to a few people, then someone turns around and says, "Oh, Chris, your race is getting called over there." "Oh, sure." You pick your track shoes up, you run around there, you throw your spikes on, you get on your blocks. You turn up to a major competition with the call room, you go and do your warm-up, you go to this call room, you start to freak out. Have I done enough? I'm now going to sit here for 20 minutes. Oh, now I feel really lethargic. I feel really heavy. Oh, sitting around, I feel terrible now. It's a cold day outside, so you don't get to re-warm up. And then all of a sudden you hear a few false starts outside, so it takes even longer.
And worse. And then they come in and say, right, there's 98 guys. Okay, there's 14 heats. You need to win your round to guarantee progression.
Yeah.
So you've just prepared. You've just flown 20 hours in a plane to get there, and 3.5 hours on a train. You've done all of this, and you spend all this money. You get there to be told, if you don't win round one, you're probably going home.
Yeah,
that's the stress. And then they march you out. It's a whole crowd of people waiting for you, watching what you're about to do. And right from the get-go, you're like, man, I'm going. I got to go. Whatever I got in the tank, I got to get rid of it now. And then they ask you to do it every day for 9 days. At the end, my brain was fried.
Yeah, I believe it. And people, unless you've been in that situation, wouldn't understand how taxing that is, mentally, that you're just so fatigued at the end of it, more than physical. But that's what they go back to all the time. Once you get to a certain level in any sport, it's a mental game. Everyone's probably prepared the same. It's purely just a mental game. I have been beaten by lesser athletes because they've mentally been able to cope with the day better than me.
Yep.
There's no doubt whatsoever. And in 400s in particular.
And interestingly, I listened to a couple of interviews with Sydney McLaughlin's coach. Sydney McLaughlin, the 4-hurdler.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
She started her campaign this year just running flat fours. And she's run 2. She banged out a 49 60 or 70, and then a 49.54 a couple of days ago. But the first one she lost. She was beaten by a better athlete. And she was talking about that because she enters every race, obviously, to win, and she got beaten. Mm-hmm. And a guy who showed me this interview, he rang me, he said, I've just been listening to a 13-minute interview with Sydney McLaughlin's coach, and he sounds like you. He's telling the athlete all of the things in regards to their narrative and what they're telling themselves, and to trust the process, and what you need to learn from that particular run and what you executed well, and to walk away happy.
Yeah. Because
if you don't walk away happy and take the good from it, then you take the bad into your next run. You take the bad into your next training session. It just, you dwell on the negative instead of taking out the good. And he talked a lot about that because with track, it's really easy. Track athletes are always grumpy because no matter what time they run, they always think they could have gone faster.
Yeah, and here's the crazy thing about that, and I recall back when I was coaching as well, that we want to run, for some reason, every single time we walk onto the track, we want to run our best time.
Oh, yeah. You want to run a PB.
And running this weekend in our program has nothing to do with times. It's purely part of the training program. And we even had situations where I think one Saturday when they had a winter series or maybe some sort of race on the weekend, we trained the night before and I flogged athletes knowing that I just wanted them to get one more run in and run quite tired. But then when they run a really bad time, they're really disappointed and they've run the hardest session the night before, which you're never going to actually recover from. And then we run poorly. So it's a really interesting thing. Here's a question for you around that. Did you find it easier to prepare and walk out on the field playing rugby and play well, or to prepare and actually run well at track?
Oh, rugby.
Why?
Because I had other players around me that I could depend on that were working together as a collective. And the other reason was, even if something went wrong on the field, it's 80 minutes of footy. So I had more opportunities to correct things. Even
100%.
Whereas with track, the preparation there, particularly in the shorter sprints, which I'm not good at because I'm not a starter and other people are. I mean, just executing your start correctly and the amount of pressure involved with getting that right. Whereas I would pretty much disregard that and just start and get into my running. The pressure just with executing that is massive, because a lot of people know if I don't get that piece of the puzzle, my race is in trouble from the get-go. Whereas I'm this type of runner where my race isn't in trouble from the get-go. I can really come around a bend in a 205th position and run people down.
Sure.
But if that's not who you are and you don't get that first 50 right, you're in trouble.
I was much better at playing football than as a sprinter. So much better for exactly the same reason. I could turn up,
I would agree with that.
Feel like a bag of shit, not warm up that well, be quite tired, quite fatigued from the week, get out on the field, be running around like a headless chicken, take a couple of bumps, get the ball in your hand, I'm on, I'm good.
Yeah.
And as you said, you get 80 minutes to actually make up for it. You have a terrible first quarter and you can get your head back in the game, where track, man, it's over and done with so quickly. I was a much, much better footballer than I'd ever be a track athlete.
Well, also, I don't recall many days where I've walked onto the track and gone, I'm just not feeling it, even though it has happened, but rarely. And then you run amazing. A lot of times, if I'm not feeling it, it gets reflected.
Yeah. I can only recall one day, and I didn't run, unbelievable, but I ran a high 53. But I wasn't even going to run the 400. I was literally sitting in the stand. I'd warmed up. I was sitting there with Phil, and there was no one around. I hadn't done the work. Didn't think I was in great shape. I ran the 1, the 2, and I'm like, I've had enough. I was up in Newcastle, and Phil's like, oh, you should go and actually run the 4. And I'm like, nah. And I was talking myself out of it. I just didn't want to do it. Didn't want to go through that pain. Literally the last minute, they're calling people up, and it was a pretty casual meet. So I ran down, threw the spikes on, jumped in the run. Someone went out like a cut cat, and he was so far in front. I'm like, God, this dude, he's just going to blast me. What am I even doing here? Anyway, he blew up and I went past him. And because there was no pressure, I did at the last minute, I ran some silly time because I just didn't even think about it. Yeah. I just thought, but we put the track, I just found so stressful. I think that's what got to me in the end, personally. I just didn't want that constant anxiety of, the racing. It actually starts to impact you at the beginning of the week when you get a race on Saturday. And I'm like what you said before, I thoroughly just enjoyed the process and the journey.
And I think that's where I've gotten to. But one thing I keep reinforcing this in track is that if you don't get your head in the right space every time you lose a race, then track's not for you.
No.
Because you are going to lose 99% of the races you ever go in. And if you find yourself in a position where you're winning everything, there's so many levels for you to go to. You will meet people as quick as you and better, unless your name's Usain Bolt.
And I think the same applies, and we have spoken about this before as well, maybe just personally. We're playing a team sport, particularly, I played Australian rules, and there's 18 players. When you turn up to training on a Monday, there's 40 players. There's first and reserves. You can hide at training.
Yep.
You can, when they say you've got to run 100 meters and do 50 push-ups at one end. No one's standing there counting your push-ups one at a time. You can cheat the push-ups. You can do a terrible push-up. You can just lumber up to the other end and just make out that you're running. You can just sort of hide in the pack. And then when it comes to plenty do. And then it comes to game day, you can do exactly the same thing. I'm sure you saw it. I played with guys for years. There'd be games where they didn't even touch the ball. They didn't take one bump or ever touch the ball. And they turn up to Sunday training. They're as fresh as a daisy. And I'm looking at these people saying, how could we have played in the same game? Yeah. I can't even move today. I can't walk. I'm so exhausted. And you're running around like a cat and there's nothing wrong with you. Where in track, and I used to say this to our squad all the time, if you're not prepared to be uncomfortable, at least most of the time, this sport ain't for you. Particularly as a 400-meter runner.
Oh, yeah, 4 and 8. Like, I was rabbiting for an 8 runner yesterday. It's a 13-year-old kid. He's got ability. I mean, he's run a 2:10, but he's got plenty more to go because he's got natural speed.
Sure.
But he has no propensity for pain. Like, he ran a 6.5.43 yesterday and got to the last, and he wasn't pushed. We didn't push him at all. His 300 was 49.9. The last rep. Broke down and started crying. Oh, no, he's 13-year-old boy. No, I have girls that do better than that. They don't cry. And his dad walked over and said, what are you crying for? And he said, oh, it hurts. And it's just like, well, please. You're the mate. And I said, and I've said this to his father. I'm not the coach. I'm just a rabbit. But I've said to the coach who's younger than me, and I said, always use this line with the parent. Do you want me to train him because he wants him to run 2 minutes flat. I said, do you want me to train him like a 2-minute runner or a 13-year-old schoolboy? That's your choice. So we'll keep pushing him to run like a 2-minute runner, or we can go back and just train him like a 13-year-old schoolboy and he can run around at school carnivals and beat everyone at school carnival and think he's a genius. But as soon as he goes to districts and as soon as he goes to regionals and states, he's going to get towed up.
Yeah.
But that's okay. I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
No, of course.
Make your mind up. You tell us, because I'm not going to keep go and get the tissue box for a kid because he thinks he's he's uncomfortable. And he's not in pain. He's just uncomfortable.
Yeah, for sure.
But
and we've spoken about this. How do you actually teach that though? How do you teach
can't.
that?
I don't think it's teachable.
Right? No, I don't. I agree. It's not.
Some kids I've got girls who guts it out and same age, they'll go and throw up over the fence doing forward and get back on the line.
Yeah.
And the parents know it and they're good with it. They're like,
you can't teach that.
You can't teach it. No. If a kid can't cope and he's pulling up stumps and going, I don't like this, it hurts, he's not running 2 minutes.
No, he's not going to find himself. And maybe if he's got that much talent, maybe there's an event for him, but it's not an 800 meters.
Well, it's not. Every time I drop the speed, the 100 splits below 15 into the 14s. And by the way, this is a kid that can run one off probably a 25-something second 200.
Yeah.
But he'll do it once, and then he's in an ambulance.
Yeah.
And then if you do multiple reps where you drop into the 4, he's cooked. He'll just blow up and say, nah, it's too painful.
Yeah.
So if that's where your head's at, I don't care how much ability you've got. I just don't think it's going to translate into a good athlete.
I think that 13-year-old I think by the time you're 15, I do think that 13's a time, listen, and I haven't coached kids, but I just recall 13's that time where you start really embracing that. Embracing the suck. But I think it still has a little bit of time to change, but I think if it hasn't happened probably by around 15.
Yeah, no. He's done.
Old. Yeah.
I remember, and you'll remember as well, when you're a 13, 14, 15-year-old kid in Australia, because we're a pretty rough and tumble country, you're running at everything.
Yeah.
You have no regard for your own personal safety.
Yeah.
When you're an Australian and you're 15, if you're playing as team sport like rugby, and if you can't translate that attitude to, say, running a 4 or 8, you will not handle the pain. When I was running at people playing rugby when I was 13, 14, 15, I had no regard for my personal safety.
No.
I was chatting to people like I didn't care, you know.
But I mean, sure, you like me, I played football with some talented kids,
Yeah,
but they didn't have that same capacity to actually hurt themselves.
and you need that.
You do. I agree you do, but they were so talented physically. I mean, their skill level was so high compared to mine at that age, but they had no courage whatsoever.
Yeah, and you need courage.
They couldn't hurt themselves at training, and they couldn't actually take those physical knocks. But
yeah.
So I think you really have to, as you said, started off with, you have to embrace the journey. I mean, training is, such a big part of it. You've got to be able to hurt yourself, and just, not so much enjoy it all the time. I think you need sort of some reprieve now and then, but you've got to embrace that for sure, and for the long term, because it goes for a long time.
There's a big difference with, as I say, training being fun and enjoying that journey. Like, you can hurt at training and enjoy that process. It's not fun by any stretch of the imagination. If you think it's fun, you're probably sitting in a different space. You're that kid that, rather than us getting a magnifying glass and burning ants, he's burning himself because that's more fun. Like, that kid's got problems. He needs psychotherapy. That's a problem. But
did you burn ants with a magnifying glass?
I did, yeah.
Oh, yes.
There wasn't much to
I
it.
did it.
Yeah.
Newspapers, ants, anything you could find. Every now and then you would test it on your own arm.
Even those plastic army men.
Yeah.
We smelt them. So
we're showing our age now.
We melted everything. Yeah. Melted everything. So
it's funny.
But yeah, that's why I tried to explain to people the difference between having fun at in sport and enjoying it. To me, it's very different. I enjoy the process of being a better 400-meter runner, but not one element of it is fun.
No.
Not one piece of that puzzle. You wouldn't wish the things that we do on your worst enemy because it's so painful.
Yeah. And that's like many things in life, it's I enjoy my work at the moment. It's and in the space I work in, but a lot of the things that we have to do, they're definitely not fun.
No, there's nothing fun about it.
But again, the process and hopefully the end result is actually quite rewarding. So you just embrace that process. Yeah. But there is times when it's not fun. What about you started off with the whole losing thing? How people actually deal with losing?
Well, losing for me, I mean, and by the way, and this happened in Sydney when we were training at Narrabeen, is that there was peanut heads out there all the time. That other idiot that used to think he was going to be a great 400-meter runner, never broke a minute, who always beat me at training. Do you know what I mean? He'd always be in front of me and beating me at training, and then he'd pull out of the last few reps because he was corked.
Yeah.
And the same thing's happening up here. Everybody's beating at training. They're even lying about their times to beat me. Like we had a rhythm 250 on the other night to finish, and we rolled in about 36.5, and a couple of sprinters, and I'm talking 60, 100-meter runners, came over and showed me their watches at 35 seconds. And I'm going, mate, I don't know how you're pressing buttons, but it reminds me of people that press them way, and early and way past the line.
Yes.
I said, there's no way you guys ran faster. This is me and Gary Parkinson, two very accomplished 400-meter runners. These two peanut heads, they're 60 are beating us over 250 in a rep, last rep of the day. And
take 5 steps and press go, right?
Yeah, take 5 steps and press the button. But like I say, the people who are in that space, they really struggle with losing.
Yeah.
They're taking the wrong meaning out of losing, not just at competition, but at training. Whereas for me, I don't care who beats me at training. It's not an issue. I only care about executing what I need to do. And if I had to run a 36.5 250, I run 36 time 250.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in 35. It doesn't interest me.
Yeah,
because I'm not at that phase.
Yeah, sure.
And every time I go to an interclub meet in Queensland, a lot of times, I am going to lose races because I'm seeded. So I'm pretty much going to lose. But I don't look at who beat me more so, even though we might talk about it. I really look at how I executed, what I did, what I think I did poorly, and what I think I did really well, and what I take into the next phase of my training and hence competition. I think if you do that, you'll be a better athlete. If you walk away and just look at time and go, that's a terrible time, and dwell on that, I think you're going to be a miserable athlete.
Yeah, for sure.
Because and unfortunately, a lot of athletes are miserable. They,
I did get some pleasure out of every now and then we'd have those, a newcomer to the squad and they'd want to jump on and let's say we're running 150s, we're going to do 8 or whatever it was, 2x4. Yeah. And then you would make them aware it's a pretty tough session, just stick with the rest of the bunch, but they want to, same thing, sit out in front. Yeah. There is that part of your brain when you've been doing it for a very long time that you just get sick of it. You just keep winding the speed up and then just keep trimming a little bit off the rest. Just make it a little bit shorter each time. So it just get that bit harder just to bury somebody. But every now and then, it wouldn't creep in. I wouldn't do it very often, but every now and then that would creep in and I'd actually want to execute that and actually make someone hurt a bit. But yeah,
I've got 2 girls that do it. And they did it again. Like we had a ladder down from 500 and they did it. They were running way too fast.
Yeah.
So I changed it to decreasing rest. And one of them didn't complete. Cooked up. She had to what? And I said, I told you before we started, take it easy. These are your splits. Nah. I said you've got to get this like your 300 rhythm time should be around 52, 54. Nah, 47. Cooked. Done. Because you've got to be out in front.
Yeah.
And can't seem to figure it out. But
I saw that for years. So it's kind of funny where some people just don't get it. They just don't get to that point where they can, the process is the process. I'm not sure.
But you can, as you say, and this is part of our human nature and a part of everyone's different personality, you can present 5 people with the same set of facts or information and get 5 really radically different results.
100%.
Simply because of just it's just their disposition. They've just taken that same information and done this with it.
Yeah.
When the other person has done this with it, and and you've got 2 different results.
Yeah, for sure.
With the same info, and that's a real problem I think for anyone involved in sport or anything. Is you need not only need guardrails, but you need someone with an interpretive basis of understanding to interpret that information for them, because they literally cannot do many of them will not do it by themselves. They'll come and tell you, here's some information I have based on what just happened. And a lot of times it'll be dead wrong.
Goes back to our conversation last week about having a coach though, right?
Correct. And trust that process.
Yeah,
people
for sure.
bring me their results all the time and I'll go and they'll make comments and I'll go, you're dead wrong. You're not even close to what you just told me about what you just executed. Because this is what actually happened.
Yeah, for sure.
And this is the way you should be perceiving it. Then they start to get it. But that's part of that process, that people make poor decisions about losing, and sometimes even poorer decisions about winning. And they don't, and therefore they don't become better for it. They don't become better athletes. They don't become better at a lot of things because they're interpreting data incorrectly and then re-implementing the wrong parameters.
Mate, I've got to call it a wrap because I need to get off to a meeting. But it's definitely a good topic to chat about. And we can chat for hours about that sort of process. But all good. All right. Well, that's a wrap.